Hey guys, it's Courtney and I'm back with another design team project for Scrapping for Less. Today we'll be using the Brutus and Friends stamp set by Brutus and Monroe, and I'll be creating a very simple one-layer scene here with no masking and no ink blending at all. I start off by stamping my largest image. That way I can kind of build around it. I try to go from largest to smallest in most cases, especially when I'm not doing any masking. So I started off with this dog house, then I'll move on to the dog and I'll start filling in some of the other images, like this little water bowl with little bones sticking out. For this bag of dog food here, I put that kind of in the background because my plan was to create a fence in the background. So I wanted to make it look like this bag of dog food was kind of leaning against the fence. For this little toy here, this rope toy that the dog has, I should have stamped that straight, not necessarily at an angle, but it's fine. So once my images were stamped, I moved on to the fence. I'm starting off with my T-square ruler here and a pencil. I always start with a pencil first just to make sure that I'm happy with the placement before I go over it with my pen. I just drew a horizontal line and then I'll draw in some vertical lines, and this will be where my fence posts are. I'm not doing any kind of design or shape to these fence posts. I'm just keeping it nice and simple with some straight lines. Once you are happy with the placement and you're okay with the way your fence looks, you can go ahead and move on to your Copic Safe pen. I use an EK Success journaling pen, and I just went over the vertical lines. The horizontal line, I'm not going over with the pen because you wouldn't normally see that. Your grass would normally cover that part of it up, the bottom of the fence. So I'm not worried about going in with the pen over that. But you will want to make sure that you erase your pencil line before you do any of your coloring. Once you do your coloring, you will not be able to erase it. I had the vertical lines to kind of guide me as to where that pencil line was, so I was okay with erasing it now. Next, we will move on to the Copic coloring, and I'll be starting off with the doghouse. I wanted to make this red, even though it's obviously made out of wood. I still wanted to make this red so that it didn't blend in with the fence that we'll do in a minute here. So I'm starting off with my lightest color, which is the R22, and just mapping out my darkest areas. For the little roof shingles, I just put the shading off to the one side of each shingle just to give it a little bit of dimension. Once my lightest color was down, I moved on to the darkest color, and I'm just putting in a line. This is a really, really dark red, so I don't want my image to end up too dark, so I'm just putting in a line underneath underneath the roof, where that would cast a shadow, and then off to the left. Then I'll go in with my two mid-tone colors and start my flicking and just extend that line out a little bit. Then finally move back to my lightest color and blend all of those shades out. Now the images in this stamp set have a lot of detail to them that gives you the dimension already. It will guide you as far as where to put that dimension, but also if you're new to Copics or new to alcohol markers, these are great images because you don't have to do a whole lot of shading. The illustration itself from the stamps already gives you a lot of detail, so you could really get away with even coloring these images solid and you'll still get that detail from the stamp itself. You can even start with just two color blends and kind of get used to your shading, and you're still going to get great results just because of the lines within this illustration. Now the inside of this doghouse, I didn't get a great impression when I stamped it, but we will go back in later and just add some depth to that as well. Once my little doghouse was colored, we will move on to the fence. I'm going to speed this up because this does take a little bit of time, but it's not hard. So I'm starting off with my lightest color. This is an E53, and I'm covering up the entire area. I'm covering up the entire area mainly because I want my colors to be able to blend easier, and putting down just a base layer of your lightest color will saturate the paper a little bit and make those colors blend. Next, I'm just very, very softly with just the tip of my marker doing little squiggly lines. Sometimes my marker's skipping because I'm just barely touching the paper. And I'm just doing this across the entire fence. I don't want these to look perfect. I want this to make it look like it's wood grain. So don't be too particular. Next, I'll go in with my darkest color, and I am just going over these lines where one fence post would cast a shadow onto the other, and also creating a shadow with these images that are kind of leaning against the fence. Next, I'll go in with my darkest midtone and extend those lines out a little bit. Now, here's where I'm starting my flicking motions because I want to get a better blend. I'm not going too far with my darkest midtone because I don't want to cover up those lines that we created for the wood grain. Next, I'll go in with my lightest midtone and extend those out even further. Again, still using that flicking motion. And because this is a lighter color than those little wood grain lines that we put in, you will still be able to see them. And last, I will go back in with my lightest color and fill in that entire area again. And this will help all of those shades of browns blend together. Next, we will move on to the coloring of the other images within the stamp set. I will start off with this little bag of dog food, and we had that red dog house. So I wanted to make this blue. I wanted there to be pops of color because we have a lot of neutral colors here. So I covered the entire thing with my lightest color, went in with my darkest color off to the left and where the bag kind of folds over on itself. And like I said, there's a lot of lines within these images that will make this dog food bag appear that it's kind of crinkled. So you can either go over those with your darkest color and blend that out, or just let it be, and those lines will still give you that dimension. For this little toy here, I'm going to move on to my E30 markers, which are very similar to the E50s, but they are slightly different so that it will give it a little bit of, well, you'll be able to tell that it's different from the fence. It won't blend in too much. I wish I would have skipped this particular image because I just feel like it blended in a little bit too much, or maybe not necessarily put it against the fence. But as long as you create that shadow, you will be able to tell it's a different image than the fence itself in the end. Next, we will move on to this little water bowl here. And I wanted this to make it look like it was metal. So I'm using my C markers here, and I'm just going to create shading on either side of the image. This is a round object, so you'll want to make sure that your highlight is right there in the center. And I'm varying my flicks here and leaving a pretty strong highlight in the center just to make this look not only round, but shiny as well. And then I just took my lightest C marker, which is my C1, and colored in that little bone so it wasn't just stark white. For the dog, I wanted this little dog to look somewhat whitish, grayish. So I'm using my W markers here, and I'm going right in with my darkest color and just lightly going over the darkest areas where his little face hangs over his little chest or the rest of his body. His tail is kind of bent up and would create a shadow on his back where his legs are kind of overlapped. Then I'll go in with my mid-tone color. This is the W3, and just extend those lines out just a little bit. And then finally go in with my W1 and extend those out even further. Now the W1 you will still see your flicks because it's not light enough where you can totally fade to white. So if you don't like that look, what I do is I take my colorless blender and just very quickly go over the entire thing, and that will remove those flick marks but still leave that dimension that you created. So I'll go in now and darken up that little opening there of the doghouse, and I'm taking my black marker and just drawing a line where the darkest would be, which would be on the innermost part of the doghouse. Then blend that out with a C7 and then a C5. Next, for the grass, we're not going to do any kind of dimension here. We're going to do solid colors here, but still be able to create some dimension by creating shadows underneath our little objects that we've created. So I just took a variety of YG and G markers here. I tried to stick to colors that had the second number somewhat close to each other, because you will find that those blend a little bit easier. This is my lightest color here, and I'm just covering up the entire area. At this point, I'm not worried about getting too close to my image, because I'm going to go back and touch all of those areas up. But I did get pretty close just to make it a little bit easier. Next, I'll go in with my darkest color, and I'm just putting a little shadow under each of the images that we had colored. This is a G marker, but you will still find that it does blend well with the YGs. Next, I'll go in with my darkest midtone, and all I'm doing is extending those shadow lines out a little bit. Same thing with my lightest midtone, extend those out even further. And then finally, I'll go back to my lightest color and cover up the entire area again, blending those shadows out and also covering up any areas that maybe we didn't get too close to the image before. Also making sure that I don't have those streak lines that you get sometimes with alcohol markers. Going over that more than once will eliminate those lines. Last, I took my VersaFine Onyx Black ink and stamped my sentiment right there on the fence, and added just a little bit of sparkle to his little water bowl and the bag of dog food, just because I have to add sparkle to everything. And that is the card for today. Thanks so much for stopping by, guys, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.